This is Pastor M.D. Lewis, speaker for the Bible Interpreter Tapes, in the continuation of our study in the title, Cain's Mark on the Beast. Now, in the previous lesson, we took up the mark of the beast, the third angel. Now I want to go back in the Bible revelation and show the further revelation of the mark as it is on Cain's life and how it is related to the mark of the beast in the book of Revelation. So let us review just a moment the prophecy in the 13th chapter of Revelation and verse 16 and 17, and it says, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." Now, I want to point out a word or two in these verses that lead into our study in relationship to Cain. It says, "And he causes all, both small and great, to receive this mark." Now, you recall in the second angel's message, it says, "Babylon is fallen because she made the people drink the wine." Now, when they caused them or forced them to receive this mark, and as Babylon forced them to receive, to drink the wine of her doctrines, there is a distinctive reference to compulsion, which we have referred to in the previous study, is never God's technique, and those who lose the power of the Holy Spirit and lose their fidelity to God's law will resort to the power of the state and to force and compulsion. Now, I want to show you how this is also in this particular verse, and it starts with Cain in the Old Testament. Now, it goes on to say in Revelation 13, verse 17, that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of his beast, name of the beast. Now, you see, this is obviously compulsion. So I want to take you back in our study on this subject to the book of Genesis, the 4th chapter, and pick up certain principles in this mark, as I've stated before, that it reveals the entire character of the individual. I'm reading now in the book of Genesis, the 4th chapter, verse 15, and it says, "And the Lord said unto him," that is unto Cain, "Therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken upon him sevenfold, and the Lord set a mark upon Cain." Now, the word mark here, as I've said, is the same as sign, where it says the Sabbath is a sign between me and my people, is identically the same word in Hebrew as in this particular text. Now, you are familiar with the background of this particular instance. God told Cain and Abel, after sin had begun, that they were to offer sacrifices to recognize their sin and their reliance upon God and God's provision for their salvation, in the sense of blood to make atonement for sin. Well, Abel complied with this. We read that in the book of Hebrews, the 11th chapter, that Abel accepted this righteousness through the offering of the sacrifice and became one of the first to exhibit righteousness by faith. But Cain, his brother, took an issue with him, and I'm sure that Cain made it clear to Abel that inasmuch as he was the eldest son, he was in a position of authority, and that what he said that Abel should do, Abel should comply. Well, you remember the argument that came over their sacrifice. Now, you understand that the sacrifice that Cain brought was fitting and proper. That is, they were to bring some vegetable matter and offer it as a sacrifice. Now, this was a proper sacrifice of expressing certain aspects of their religious life. But God had said that they first must offer a blood of a lamb to indicate they were sinners. Then they were to offer other sacrifices entailing vegetable matter. But Cain did not want to comply with this. And inasmuch as Abel did, and his righteousness that was by faith was a source of conviction to Cain, either Cain must comply with the conviction and do what God said, or turn against his brother. Now, right here begins the great epic of forcing a person in a religious service that ends in the book of Revelation, which we're discussing in the three angels' messages. So Cain finally said to his brother, "Listen, I am the eldest and I have the authority, and you do as I say." Well, Abel was not going to go contrary to what God had said and what he himself had submitted himself to be obedient to God. And in the fracas and opposition, Cain killed his brother Abel. Now, it is very, very obvious that the way the first man dies in the record of the Bible, in the situation of Cain and Abel, is also the basic principles in which the last person will die in the book of Revelation. That's why I'm bringing this particular matter up. Now, in the book, the Bible Commentary, in Volume 1, page 1087, in the first column, this very, very significant statement is made. "Any man, be he minister or layman, who seeks to compel or control the reason of any other man becomes an agent of Satan to do his work, and in the sight of the heavenly universe he bears the mark of Cain." Now, that's a very significant statement, and it is obvious that the mark placed on Cain was for the very same purpose that the mark of the third angel will be placed upon those who use force in making the persons comply with the Sunday Sabbath. So the subject of Cain and the mark starts off the great principle that results from individuals using force, which is contrary to God's law, and exhibits a compulsion which is, as this particular text says, an indication that the person is controlled by Satan. So now it's very obvious in the book of Revelation when it says that the spirits of devils come out of Babylon because of their fornication with the kings of the earth. You can see how that is in compliance with this particular statement. In the book of Job, the 10th chapter and verse 14, it says, "If I sin, then thou markest me." And this word for mark in this text is the same as used in the sense of Cain, and is the same word used in the sense of the Sabbath, is a sign or a mark. "If I sin, then thou markest me, and thou wilt not acquit me from mine iniquity." So here it is indication that if the person sins, he shall be marked. Now, in the writings of the church, that is found also on the chart that we are using in behalf of these statements, I read this particular reference on the second chart in paragraph 7, taken from Great Controversy, page 592. "Political corruption is destroying the love of justice and regard for truth. And even in free America, rulers and legislators, in order to secure public favor, will yield to the popular demand for a law enforcing Sunday." Now, if those particular words were translated into the New Testament in the time of Christ and his trial, it would be very fitting, for the persons of the Jews were seeking the favor of the Romans to get them to sign the death decree to execute Christ. And they would do anything to receive the favor, even if they could cultivate it by unanimous consent of the Jewish people. And that's why they got them to cry, "Crucify, crucify Christ," to show that their particular attitude towards Christ was in accordance with the public. And I'm sure that Pilate took note of the popular opinion and finally voiced his decision in regard to it. Now, you see, that's exactly what the legislators will do here, and it says that these legislators who have given indications of corruption and the abscan trials that are in Congress in the last few months and many other instances indicate that our legislators perhaps do not have the highest scruples, as this particular statement intimates. The rulers and legislators, in order to secure public favor, will yield to the popular demand for a law enforcing Sunday observance. Now, I want to point out in this statement that if the legislators, as was also the Jews in the time of Christ, aware that their lives were not fully and completely in accordance with the principles of Christ, they would jump at an opportunity to give an exhibition of their religious fidelity by giving voice to support a Sunday law. You can see how this would fit in to the personal convictions of the individual. So it says, the liberty, I'm going on now to quote from this statement from the chart records, the liberty of conscience, which has cost so great a sacrifice, will no longer be respected. This comes, as I said, from Great Controversy, page 592. Now, in page 591 of the same book, it goes on to say, through fear or force, Satan endeavors to rule the conscience and to secure homage to himself. Now, right here, I want to call your attention again to the basic principle which I have been stating, that the holiest place of the heavenly sanctuary lays the basis for all the events of the last days. Now, this particular statement bolsters this particular observation, that Satan is endeavoring to control the conscience. Well, that's exactly what God is endeavoring to do. On page 630 of Desire of Ages, it says that it is God's sovereign right to control the conscience of the individual, and he does it by the principle of love, which is the basic principle of his law. Now you can see why the Ten Commandments in the ark are underneath the lid that is solid gold, upon which the atonement is made, which represents the conscience of the individual. The blood will be put upon the conscience to cleanse it from guilt, just as much as in the physical sense, the blood was put on the gold lid of the ark that was under conviction of the transgression of the law that was under the lid, to cleanse the conscience of the individual, because that blood came from Christ's sacrifice on Calvary. So you can see in this statement that while the God and the administration of the heavenly sanctuary, and in the last days of the eschatology we have come to the last apartment of the heavenly sanctuary, God is revealing by the three angels' messages his intent by the gospel and the judgment to set everyone free from the guilt of sin. At the same time, Satan is endeavoring to bring them by compulsion into the submission and the control and bondage of guilt and sin. So Satan is endeavoring to control the conscience by forcing the people to observe the false Sabbath, where God is endeavoring to set them free. So it says, to accomplish this, he works through both religious and secular authorities, moving them to enforcement of human laws in defiance of the law of God. That comes from Great Controversy, page 591. So you can see that what God is doing through the revelation of the sanctuary, and particularly the most holy of place, Satan is doing just exactly the opposite. Now, in the book of Job again, in the 26th chapter, is a very interesting verse, I should say the 27th chapter of Job, verse 6. It says, my righteousness I hold fast, and I will not let it go. My heart shall not reproach me so long as I live. Now, that's a very interesting text and has tremendous insight. It says here, my righteousness I will hold fast, and I'll not let it go. My heart shall not reproach me so long as I live. So as long as the individual is holding on to righteousness, and as we have revealed in the angels' messages, it is Christ's righteousness, which is the gospel, his heart or his conscience will not reproach him. That is to say, he will not be convicted of iniquity. So the situation will finally come, as we have already said, that the people who live to see Christ come must achieve the character of Christ fully. That is, they will have his righteousness fully. And when they do, their heart will be free from conviction of sin. And what sins they have committed before they attain to this particular status will be atoned for by the blood that goes on the lid of the ark in the ministration of the heavenly sanctuary. So it is important for us to see here in the interpretation of these prophecies that the work of the heavenly sanctuary in finally freeing the individual from the guilt of sin will bring him into a relationship of righteousness with Christ that will give a testimony that will convict sinners in the last days of their iniquity. Now they have an opportunity to submit to that conviction and the plan of the gospel and be saved from their iniquity, or if they are not of that particular mind, they may take the converse attitude and endeavor to destroy those who convict them. Now you see, the saints have come into a relationship to the law equivalent to Christ previous to his crucifixion. And the effect that he had on the Jewish nation will be the same effect that the saints have upon the wicked in the last days. So the prophecies of the book of Revelation, as we pursue them further, will be the outplaying of this particular drama of the saints reaching absolute perfection, in contrast to those who have are absolutely controlled by Satan. So then the mark of iniquity can go on the wicked, because their characters are through and through controlled by Satan, and the mark of Christ's righteousness can go on the saints because they are through and through representations of his character. Now let us turn to the book of Hebrews and notice further how these particular points are revealed in the holiest place of the heavenly sanctuary that has to do with the last day events. Now, the reason why I make these points and so emphatic to bring them out is because there is certain opinions that are being promoted in relationship to our church today that do not represent the saints as achieving perfection. And they somewhat cast a reflection upon the true interpretation of the heavenly sanctuary and the most holy place as to what it will accomplish, particularly in the lives of the saints in the last days. Now, I'm reading from the book of Hebrews, the 9th chapter and verse 24. Now, you recall in this 9th chapter, Paul is bringing out the point that there are two apartments or two services in the earthly sanctuary, the daily and the yearly, and that they divide between the holy place and the most holy place. And he says that in the Old Testament, they went into the holiest place year after year after year. Now, he said, had the services there absolutely cleansed the conscience from guilt, they would not have to recall their sins and repeat the service. So Paul saw through the repetition that it was only symbolic of what Christ would do once and for all. So in the 24th verse, he says, "For Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands," that is, the sanctuary on earth, "which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us." Now it goes on to say, "It is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment." So finally, the conscience will finally be cleansed of sin, as he says in the 14th verse of that same chapter 9, "How much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offer himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God." Now this is the distinctive work of the last apartment of the heavenly sanctuary, when the blood of Christ from Calvary, where he paid the full atonement for sin, is applied to the lives of the individuals, first those who are dead and trust in God, who are asleep in their graves, and finally to those who are alive upon the earth in the last days. That when the Spirit applies this blood to the individual, that is, to his conscience, and cleanses him of all guilt, the individual will be in absolute accordance with the Ten Commandments. So the services of the most holy place are very unique, and they will have a very unique place in the lives of the saints as the drama of the last day events are executed. So it says here that their conscience will be absolutely purged. Now it says in the 10th chapter, verse 2, speaking about the services of the Old Testament, he said, "Because that the worshippers once purged, that is, by the symbol of the goat's blood, should have no more conscience of sins." Now here he shows what is the purpose of the goat's blood, was to symbolize the conscience being completely free of the guilt of sins. That was symbolic. But the symbolic goat's blood will find its fulfillment in the blood of Christ that shall be applied on the lid of the ark in the most holy place for the saints who are living upon the earth in the last days. And as they are among those who are living upon the earth, they must have an experience with God that is unique from any other group, the 144,000, that they have achieved to absolute perfection of life. And when the services in the most holy place, in the application of Christ's blood, in application to their sins, their conscience will be absolutely free from sin. Now notice this statement in the book of Acts of the Apostles, page 541. It is no part of Christ's mission to compel men to receive him. Now this is what we have revealed in the instance of Cain, and the mark that he received was a mark of compulsion. It is Satan and men actuated by his spirit who seek to compel the conscience. Under a pretense of zeal for righteousness, men who are confederated with evil angels sometimes bring suffering upon their fellow men in order to convert them to their ideas of religion. But Christ is ever showing mercy, ever seeking to win by the revealing of his love. He can admit no rival in the soul, nor accept of partial service, but he desires only voluntary service, the willing surrender of the heart under the constraint of love. So here this statement distinctly brings to pass the great purpose of the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary and these three angels' messages. Now let us move on in one more observation of the three angels' messages regarding the mark of the beast, and what it reveals in the relationship to the compulsion of certain aspect of God's law in the last days. I'm turning now to the book of Revelation, the 13th chapter, and reading this statement that concerning the mark of the beast, it says that this power shall cause all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. Now I'm reading from Revelation 13, verse 16, and now 17. And that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now this particular law or Sunday law is may be designated as the second Sunday law. And this Sunday law comes in connection with the mark of the beast. And inasmuch as this mark of the beast is spoken of as the work of the woman that rides the beast, and with the 10 horns, which represents the entire government of the world. It is indicative now that we have passed from a government represented by the United States and amendment to the Constitution, which is the first Sunday law. We have passed into a situation of a world government and a world church, which is represented by the woman called Babylon, and an enforcement of a decree that entails buying and selling. Now I want to point out in the verse of Revelation 18, verse 4, which I alluded to a moment ago, but I want to specifically point it out now. It says, "For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." Now notice it says, all nations, that is worldwide, have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Now we'll have more to say about this, but I want to introduce it here because it's in this text. The merchants of the earth are the financial tycoons of our society. They have come into this picture of Babylon. Now it's obvious how they are coming into it, for they are the ones who are so in control of the economy that they could make a decree that none shall be able to merchandise, to buy and sell. So not only is this Babylon involving the 10 horns, which are all the political powers of the earth, it has now incorporated the financial aspects of the world. Now God knew this would occur, and this is why in this revelation it's brought about. So in connection with the second Sunday law, which is concurrent with the mark of the beast, which is the third angel, the decree shall read that none shall be able to buy or sell, save they have the mark of this great system. So now you see that the compulsion has intensified. First, it was a law of the amendment of the Constitution of the United States in which certain merchandising and certain labor would be forbidden on Sunday. And it is stated in the church we should comply with this regulation, not to merchandise these said articles, nor to do work that would be in violation of the law, but comply with that regulation and take our Bibles and use this day for a day of Bible study with believers and non-believers. So the persons should not go in opposition. Now they are hoping that by this compulsion the persons would be in opposition, that they would have a reason to destroy them. But we are not to give them reason for this. So we now see that these three angels are revealing an intensification of compulsion. As I've indicated, first started by Cain, all through the Old Testament, and comes down now to the last day events. And that the second angel's message, Babylon is fallen, is concurrent with the first Sunday law, which is national in the United States, amendment to the Constitution. Then this particular powers of the earth, these 10 horns, constituting a world government, will come in collaboration with Babylon and make a decree that none shall be able to buy or sell. Now, of course, this is much, much more stringent. And they're doing it to force the people out of necessity of buying and selling to comply with their false law. Now, do you see right away that the individual must have an experience with God, that he would consider the sustenance of his body in a minor priority to the necessity of his person in obedience to the law of God, which would take a major priority. Now, Satan feels that the saints will not have this quality of character and will comply, but God reveals through the Holy Spirit in the revelation of these prophecies that the saints will have this quality of character, and they will not comply with the system of the world, but their allegiance to God and His ministry in the heavenly sanctuary will be of the utmost and of the greatest of concern, that they will forfeit their source of food in order to be in obedience to that law. So now you can see how very important it is that the saints know precisely the revelations of theology, that they will not be deceived. And there are certain deceptions in the church today, and it's of greater necessity that we know these prophecies, comply with them, and as we see these events coming into to shape and coming into the reality in our society, how much more we should be concerned with our allegiance to God and His law and the righteousness of Christ, that we may be among those who will express a fidelity to God and keep the commandments and give a testimony of Jesus Christ.